next hour, I'll be reading from the March 19th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: the Fed held interest rates steady and preserved a path to cutting rates this year as higher energy prices from the Iran war threatened to prolong the fight against inflation. Dimming hopes for interest rate cuts helped depress major U.S. stock indexes, with the S&P 500, Dow, and NASDAQ falling 1.4%, 1.6%, and 1.5% respectively. Bass said it would raise the prices of many of its products by up to 30% as a result of the shock waves from the conflict in the Middle East. Apple is on pace to suppress $1 billion of AI revenue this year, a number that demonstrates a key advantage the company has over rivals like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and xAI. The owner of the S&P 500 is licensing the index for the launch of a derivative contract that trades 24 hours a day on crypto exchange Hyperliquid. A redemption ceiling set by Stoneridge on a fund holding consumer and small business loans suggests that investors' concerns about private credit are broadening. Investment banks see profit opportunities as redemption requests hitting non-bank lenders drive demand for loans to cover the withdrawals. Janus Henderson clients and investment staff urged the firm to reject a takeover bid from Victory Capital in favor of a lower price deal from Trion and General Catalyst. Tencent maintained double-digit profit and revenue growth, ending 2025 on a high note as it accelerated its artificial intelligence efforts. Macy's posted an unexpected rise in same-store sales for the fourth quarter as its Bloomingdale's brand propels its turnaround. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. Escalating attacks on Persian Gulf oil and gas infrastructure are sending the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran into a dangerous new phase that threatens to worsen the crisis over worldwide energy supplies. U.S. companies will be allowed to do business with Venezuela's state-owned oil and gas company after the Treasury Department eased some sanctions. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told the Senate Intelligence Committee the Iranian regime has been degraded, but remains largely intact. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Trump's pick to lead the Department of Homeland Security, sparred with lawmakers during a contentious confirmation hearing. Democratic lawmakers stormed out of a briefing about the Epstein files, saying they don't trust Attorney General Pam Bondi to fully answer questions unless forced to do so under oath. Groups with ties to the late Cesar Chavez distanced themselves from him after allegations he abused women and girls at the height of his prominence as a labor and civil rights leader in the 1960s and 70s. The State Department said it would add 12 countries to a list of nations whose citizens must post bonds of up to $15,000 to apply for U.S. visas. Afghanistan and Pakistan announced a temporary pause in fighting ahead of the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. A shooting at the Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico left one person dead and another wounded, military officials said. The picture on today's front page shows a city setting where a very large, what appears to be an apartment building or a business building, ablaze with billows of black smoke surrounding the area. And that caption reads, "An Israeli missile strike toppled a building Wednesday in central Beirut after its inhabitants were warned it would be hit." Today's headline, strikes on Gulf energy escalate. Arab governments were furious about Israeli strikes. By Summer Saeed, Rebecca Feng, and Alexander Ward. Attacks by Israel, Iran put oil gas supplies in the crosshairs of growing conflict. Escalating attacks on Persian Gulf oil and gas infrastructure are sending the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran into a dangerous new phase that threatens to worsen the crisis over global energy supplies. Israel struck at the crown jewel of Iran's energy industry on Wednesday, the giant South Pars gas field that Iran shares with Qatar and is by far the largest in the world. Iran retaliated with 2 attacks on a major gas hub in Qatar, just across the Gulf, and a missile barrage fired at the Saudi capital, Riyadh, with debris landing near a refinery. Israel and Iran have already hit energy facilities throughout the nearly 3-week-old war, but Wednesday's attacks struck some of the world's most important hubs and raised the prospect of tit-for-tat volleys against oil and gas facilities. Already the conflict has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic choke point between the Persian Gulf and the wider world that carries about 20% of the global oil and liquefied natural gas supply during normal times. Israel's attack was aimed at stifling an important source of revenue for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the group charged with defending the Iranian regime from internal and foreign threats, people familiar with the matter said. The Guard were instrumental in violently suppressing protest in January, killing around 7,000 people, rights groups said. The U.S., which had previously pledged to rein in attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure, was informed of the plan ahead of time and had no issues with it, American and Israeli officials said on Wednesday. President Trump approved of the strike, U.S. officials said, to pressure Iran to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. The officials said Trump believed Tehran received the message and wants to refrain from further strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure. On Wednesday night, Trump denied that the U.S. knew in advance about Israel's attack on South Pars. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack on South Pars, Trump said. Unfortunately, Iran did not know this or any of the pertinent facts pertaining to the South Pars attack, and unjustifiably and unfairly attacked a portion of Qatar's LNG gas facility, he said on social media, referring to Iran's retaliatory strikes on Qatar's liquefied natural gas hub that was hit once on Wednesday and again on Thursday morning local time. No more attacks will be made by Israel, Trump added. The president went on to say that if Iran strikes Qatar's gas hub again, the U.S. will massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field at an amount of strength and power that Iran has never seen or witnessed before. The attack hit facilities that process gas coming from the field. Fars News, which is affiliated with the Revolutionary Guard, reported explosions at several units in that complex, affecting storage tanks and operating infrastructure for several phases of the field. Iran's missile attack later Wednesday on Ras Laffan, where Qatar has facilities for gas pumped from its side of the giant field, left extensive damage and set fires after 4 missiles were intercepted and 1 got through. Qatar is one of the world's biggest exporters of liquefied natural gas, a super chilled substance that can be shipped around the globe. Qatar condemned the attack as a direct threat to its national security. Benchmark Brent oil futures shot up to close to $110 a barrel, and European gas prices surged 6% in the hours following the news. The Revolutionary Guard said refineries, petrochemical facilities, and gas fields in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar have become direct and legitimate targets after the Israeli attack on South Pars. Arab governments were furious about Israel's attack and the U.S. failure to head it off, officials said. They had aggressively lobbied the Trump administration to stop U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure and now feel a target has been put on their back, they said. The Israeli targeting of facilities linked to Iran's South Pars field, an extension of Qatar's North Field, is a dangerous and irresponsible step amid the current military escalation in the region, Majed al-Ansari, an advisor to Qatar's prime minister, said on social media. Gulf states have warned the U.S. repeatedly about the risk of further escalation in an industry crucial to their livelihoods and the world economy. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Israel assassinates Iran's leaders one by one, by Dov Lieber, Benoit Falcon, and Shandi Reis. Ali Larijani, Iran's top security official, strode confidently in dark sunglasses and a black coat Friday through a rally of regime loyalists in central Tehran. It was his first public appearance in a war in which he was a known target. Brave people, brave officials, brave leaders. This combination cannot be defeated, he wrote on X. 4 days later, he was dead. Early Tuesday, Israel's intelligence services found Larijani gathered with other officials at a hideout on the outskirts of Tehran and killed him with a missile strike. That same night, Israel got a tip from ordinary Iranians that the leader of the besieged militia was holding up with his deputies in a tent in a wooded area in Tehran. It was the payoff Israel had sought after blowing up besieged headquarters and command post for more than 2 weeks, forcing its members to gather in the open. Soleimani, too, was struck and killed. Israeli and U.S. leaders said at the outset that the war with Iran would create conditions for Iranians to topple their regime. The killings early Tuesday, followed by Israeli announcement a day later that Iranian intelligence minister Ismail Khatib had also been killed, were milestones in that campaign made possible by the damage from airstrikes and a growing harvest of intelligence about possible targets. With thousands of regime members killed, from top leaders to street-level grunts, Iranians are reporting that a sense of disorder is starting to take hold. Security forces are under stress and on the run as they threaten protesters to stay off the streets and direct strikes at the U.S., Israel, and Arab neighbors across the Persian Gulf. Fed holds key rates steady as war blurs outlook. Iran conflict poses new threat to central bankers' year-long fight against inflation. By Nick Timiraeus. The Federal Reserve held interest rates steady Wednesday and tentatively preserved a path to cutting rates this year as higher energy prices from the Iran war threatened to prolong central bankers' years-long inflation fight. But at a news conference after the meeting, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said little to suggest cuts were around the corner and instead emphasized how little room officials might have to ease. He described the Fed's current policy stance as sitting much closer to one that neither spurs nor slows growth, which would make rate reductions much harder to justify unless the economy weakens. Officials voted 11-1 to hold the benchmark federal funds rate in a range between 3.5% and 3.75%, the second consecutive meeting with no change. Apple trails in AI race but is making a bundle. Gen AI apps are a growth driver for Apple's services business. By Ralph Winkler and Nate Ratner. Apple is on pace to surpass $1 billion of artificial intelligence revenue this year, a tidy sum that demonstrates Apple's important AI advantage, even as the tech giant struggles to deliver an AI strategy of its own. Apple's Siri chatbot is still dumb by modern AI standards. But what Apple does have that the other AI players don't is a dominant position in making devices. However fancy OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and xAI make their chatbots, iPhones are still a primary way to deliver them to consumers. And that means they typically pay the App Store tax, about 30% of subscription fees in the first year, and 15% per year thereafter, though rates vary by country. Generative AI apps paid Apple nearly $900 million in App Store fees in 2025, according to analyst firm App Magic. 3/4 of the revenue Apple rakes in from general AI apps in its App Store comes from Chat GPT, according to App Magic. XAI's Grok is next at about 5%. Apple's revenue from Gen AI apps rose from about $35 million in January 2025 to a high of $101 million in August. Sales have fallen from their peak, partly because ChatGPT downloads have declined, according to the data. As a portion of Apple's total sales, $1 billion is small. Yet Gen AI apps are a growth driver for Apple's services business, which investors have focused on in recent years since it has grown faster than device sales and boasts higher profit margins. The company's dominant share at the top of the smartphone market affords it another luxury: time to get its own AI strategy right. Apple's AI plan runs counter to strategies of competitors who are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on chips and data centers to build frontier large language models. Apple is spending a fraction of that, aiming instead to use all the personal information that people store on their iPhones, together with chips the tech company designs itself, to power an on-device AI strategy. That strategy could prove a winner if, as some AI researchers have suggested, access to user data and strong user privacy makes on-device AI the dominant way that consumers access the technology. Leaving the front page, other articles from within the paper follow. Texas, ethanol leaks in train derailment. More than 24 cars of a Union Pacific train derailed Wednesday morning near Houston, causing an ethanol leak from 2 of the cars, officials said. It didn't pose a threat to the public, and no injuries were reported. Visa bonds needed for 12 more nations. The State Department says it is adding 12 countries to an expanding list of nations whose citizens must post bonds of up to $15,000 to apply for U.S. visas. Effective April 2nd, passport holders from Cambodia, Ethiopia, Georgia, Grenada, Lesotho, Mauritius, Mongolia, Mozambique, Nicaragua, Papua New Guinea, Seychelles, and Tunisia will be required to pay the bond, which is refunded if the visa application is denied, or, if granted, the person adheres to the terms of the visa. That is according to the State Department website on Wednesday. After April 2nd, there will be 50 countries whose citizens are subject to the requirement, which was rolled out by the Trump administration last year as it cracked down on visa overstays. Air base shooting leaves 1 dead. A shooting that left 1 person dead and another injured on a U.S. Air Force base in New Mexico was the result of an isolated domestic dispute, military officials said Wednesday. The shooting Tuesday evening injured an active duty service member stationed at Holloman Air Force Base near Alamogordo, according to a statement from the 49th Wing. It said the person who died was a civilian and military veteran previously stationed at the base. The two weren't married, officials said. Neither was identified by name. The base was placed on lockdown for nearly 3 hours after reports of an active shooter near the convenience store on base. Officials said the shooting remained under investigation. All of those were from the Associated Press. Senators press DHS nominee in hearing. Mullen, the pick to succeed Noem, gets heated questions from Paul and others. By Michelle Hackman and Victoria Elbert, Washington. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma, President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Homeland Security, sparred with lawmakers Wednesday during a contentious confirmation hearing. The lawmaker and Trump ally faced pointed questions about his past comments and his vision for the department. If confirmed, Mullen would take the reins from Kristi Noem, whom Trump ousted earlier this month after a tumultuous tenure atop the agency. Noem's leadership at DHS was marked by near constant chaos and flashy displays of enforcement, such as the huge deployment of agents to Minnesota. In his opening statement, Mullen said he planned to take a lower-profile approach. My goal in 6 months is that we're not in the lead story every day, he said. My goal is for people to understand we're out there, we're protecting them, and we're working with them. During questioning by Senator Andy Kim, Democrat from New Jersey, Mullen appeared to say he would end a rule imposed by Noem, which required her personal sign-off on any new contract above $100,000. The rule resulted in a weeks-long backlog of contracts. That's called micromanaging, Mullen said. And I don't know if the secretary put that in or someone else did. I'm not a micromanager. In an exchange with Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, Mullen also vowed to adhere to a long-standing policy requiring immigration and customs enforcement officers to have a warrant signed by a judge before entering homes. Under Noem, ICE had issued a secret policy allowing officers to force entry without a judicial warrant if the immigrant they were searching for had received a deportation order. Senators raised questions over a trip Mullen disclosed during the hearing that he had omitted on a pre-hearing questionnaire. Mullen said that in 2015 he was asked to train with a very small contingency and go to a certain area which was scheduled for 2016. He declined to provide details about the trip, saying it was classified. At the time, Mullen was a member of the House of Representatives. Senators Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, and Gary Peters, Democrat from Michigan, pressed Mullen on details of the trip, asking if he would go to a secure facility after the hearing to share more information about what transpired. Paul, who chairs the Homeland Security Committee, suggested he could postpone Thursday's planned vote on Mullen's nomination if he didn't get details. After several rounds of back and forth with Paul and Peters, Mullen said he had no problem divulging some information in a secure location. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. I can't talk specifics. If you want to talk about general ideas, let's go down and talk in the SCIF, he said, referencing the secure facilities used for reviewing classified materials. Asked a few hours after the hearing if the vote would go forward Thursday, a representative for Paul said, "As of now, we're set to vote." From the opinion pages, Trump hasn't lost his voters over Iran. MAGA voters turn out not to agree with the noisy podcasters who oppose the war. By Carol Rove. Operation Epic Fury has greatly diminished Iran's offensive capabilities. Gone are many of its air defenses, missiles, drones, radars, planes, warships, bases, airfields, command and control centers, security headquarters, bunkers, and hiding places, along with many leaders of the regime that has pledged death to America since the Shah fell in 1979. Here at home, the U.S. and Israeli air assault has revealed a significant divide between MAGA voters and a small but influential group of MAGA media figures who claim to speak for them. These podcasters, YouTubers, and independent journalists have decided President Trump's actions are a betrayal of MAGA. To them, he's an unwitting tool of the Israelis, or, as some on the neo-isolationist right say, the Jews. Tuesday's resignation of Joe Kent as National Counterterrorism Center Director will enthuse the blame it on the Jews chorus. Mr. Kent blamed the pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby and a misinformation campaign driven by the media and Israeli officials for President Trump's decision to demolish the Iranian threat. He also said the Israelis used the same tactic to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war. In reality, Israel was reluctant to see the U.S. go to war against Saddam Hussein's regime. Much of the criticism of Operation Epic Fury comes from the likes of Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, the Israel-obsessed podcasters Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, and the conspiracist Candace Owens. Do voters who identify themselves as MAGA Republicans share their opinions? Do they feel betrayed by the president? The answer is an unequivocal no. According to a survey from the Vandenberg Coalition, a nonpartisan group committed to the idea that the national security, prosperity, and freedom of the United States require a strong and proud foreign policy. The poll was conducted March 3rd to 5th among 1,232 self-described Trump voters. News had already broken of the first American casualties, so those polled could have realized the operation would have terrible cost. Of the sample, roughly 34% are self-identified MAGA Trump conservatives, 30% moderate Republicans, 24% traditional conservatives, 5% libertarians, and 7% other. The survey first asked about approval of Mr. Trump's decision to authorize military action against Iran for the goals of 1. Preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, 2. Destroying Iran's missile arsenal and production sites, 3. Degrading Iran's terrorist proxy networks, and 4. Annihilating the Iranian naval threat. Approval was 84% among all respondents. It was 94% among MAGA conservatives, 84% among traditional conservatives, 80% among moderates, and 74% among libertarians. The poll asked if Trump voters felt that eliminating nearly 50 of Iran's terrorist leaders, many of whom are responsible for American deaths in the past, had made the U.S. safer or less safe. Respondents broke 69% safer to 16% less safe. Among MAGA conservatives, 83% said safer. Among traditional conservatives, 68%. Moderate Republicans, 66%. And libertarians, 50%. The other questions yielded similar results. 85% of Trump voters said it was important Iran does not obtain a nuclear bomb. 84% backed the U.S.-Israel military partnership, and 80% agreed the president's use of force against Iran will help deter future attacks from our adversaries. In each question, MAGA conservatives were the most supportive of Mr. Trump's position. The president bears some responsibility for the betrayal that some far-right media figures feel. He promised time and again to end wars, not start them. Long before running, Mr. Trump torched then-President Barack Obama for even considering military action against Iran. But a bigger part of the president's appeal has been his determination to make the U.S. military the greatest force for good on the planet and to project American strength. The Vandenberg poll shows the MAGA base is lining up behind this incarnation of Mr. Trump and ignoring his isolationist critics. Support for the war among the broader public is low and can get lower. If the effort in Iran stalls, the president commits ground troops, America suffers major combat losses, or oil gets stuck over $200 a barrel, Mr. Trump may begin losing support from his base. But today, MAGA enthusiasts have the president's back, no matter how muddled the administration's messaging is. Iran's Ayatollahs attack the idea of the UAE by Badra Jaffer. Abu Dhabi. In the United Arab Emirates, Iranian missiles and drones have hit airports, seaports, apartment buildings, hotels, and data centers. Tehran claims its targets are U.S. military assets, but the geography of the damage tells a different story. What Iran is attacking is an idea that an open economy can flourish in one of the world's most contested regions. That idea matters, and not only to the United Arab Emirates. Consider the strategic stakes. The UAE hosts upward of 2,000 U.S. companies, according to the U.S. consulate in Dubai. around 65,000 U.S. citizens have been living and working in the Emirates. The UAE's ports process more than $1.4 trillion in trade annually. The port of Jebel Ali is not only the UAE's main gateway to the world, but a major artery of the global order the U.S. built and depends on. Iran is targeting the UAE because of its openness and ambition. The attacks have caused real disruption. 8 people have died and more than 150 have been wounded. Stock markets suspended trading for 2 days shortly after the war began. Major international businesses, banks and consulting firms among them, evacuated office staff as a precaution. The pain is real, but alarm isn't analysis. A sober reading of the UAE's structural position reveals a story of resilience, not decline. Since 1980, through the Iran-Iraq War and its tanker battles in the Gulf, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, the 1998 oil price collapse, the 2003 Iraq War, the global financial crisis, the Arab Spring, and the COVID pandemic, Emirati gross domestic product has grown from roughly $40 billion to more than $500 billion. Each crisis produced its share of breathless predictions. Each time the UAE absorbed the shock, adapted, and accelerated. That resilience was the product of structural choices. Non-oil activities account for more than 77% of the Emirates' GDP, with the economy growing 5.1% in 2025. Foreign direct investment reached $45.6 billion in 2024, a near 50% increase that placed the UAE 10th globally. 35 comprehensive trade agreements span markets from India and Kenya to the Eurasian Economic Union. The country's sovereign wealth funds hold an estimated $2 trillion in assets, close to 4 times GDP, a fiscal buffer most group of 7 governments would envy. The critics questioning Abu Dhabi's and Dubai's status as global hubs are conflating the security of the moment with structural dynamism and resilience over time. Every major international center has its moment of acute vulnerability. New York on 9/11, London in 2005, Paris in 2015. None cease to be world cities. What matters isn't whether a place can avoid all risk, but whether it has the institutional depth, policy agility, and economic diversification to recover quickly. On all 3 measures, the UAE's track record is among the strongest of any economy. The physical infrastructure is robust. Emirati ports handle well over 20 million containers a year and connect to more than 180 ports across 6 continents. Its port of Fujairah and Khor Fakkan container port sit entirely outside the Strait of Hormuz. Dubai International Airport served 95 million passengers in 2025, the busiest in the world for international passenger traffic. These aren't mere amenities. They're infrastructure for which the world has no easy substitute. Consider what's happening on the ground today. Stock markets have reopened. Critical infrastructure has been threatened but not disrupted. The UAE's air defenses have intercepted better than 90% of the 1,700 or so drones and more than 300 ballistic missiles detected since the attacks began. The state is fully functional. This is a war the UAE didn't seek and actively lobbied to prevent. The question for the global business community is whether the fundamental case for working and investing in this country has changed. It hasn't. That case rests not on the absence of risk, but on a demonstrated history of resilience, a uniquely diversified economic base, and an unmatched set of physical and financial assets that serve not only the Gulf, but Asia, Africa, and Europe alike. President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan on March 6 visited those injured in the attacks in the hospital. Speaking to Abu Dhabi TV, he said something that speaks to the country's deeper identity and its extraordinary social fabric, woven from more than 200 nationalities. Everyone is Emirati through their love for this land and their contributions to it. That's the best possible answer to those who see only damage and miss the foundations beneath. Iran set out to destroy an idea. It has only made the case for it stronger. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. America bombs Iran and Zelensky suddenly holds aces. You don't have the cards, Trump said a year ago. Today, U.S. allies implore Ukraine for drone help. By Bernard Henri Levy. Paris. Volodymyr Zelensky is back in Paris. The Ukrainian president is the same as ever, steadfast, with a nervous system that seems fireproof and capable of withstanding anything. Not particularly exhausted either, which always astonishes me. He says he's happy about his meeting with President Emmanuel Macron, who has revealed himself over time to be the most consistent of his allies. And he still has in his eyes that ardent, cold flame that was first lit on that February 25th, 2022, when he walked bareheaded, surrounded by his ministers and generals, through the bombed streets of Kyiv. Today, our conversation begins, after fraternal embraces, with a huge burst of laughter. He asked if I remember that moment in the Oval Office when President Trump said to him, "You don't have the cards." How could I forget? I was on the Pokrovsk front with a unit of the 117th Mechanized Brigade, and I saw these tough men, hardened by every trial, weeping before their screens at the sight of that vulgar man trying to humiliate their president. Well, Mr. Zelensky continued, it's been full panic since the start of the Iran war and the rain of drones falling on the Middle East. The American administration suddenly realizes that Ukrainians have become, by force of circumstance, the world champions in the art of designing, launching, and intercepting these new weapons. They recall those August days in Washington, where Ukrainian specialists had come to demonstrate their expertise and had simulated, coincidentally, an Iranian attack on Qatar. The Pentagon, satisfied with its Patriot missiles, rebuffed them. Now, 8 months later, the region's allies, from Saudi Arabia to Jordan, passing through Israel, are discovering a new equation. No one can indefinitely fire Patriots costing more than $1 million each against Shahed drones that cost $10,000. So they call on Ukraine for help, and Mr. Zelensky, generous prince that he is, sends his experts to assess the situation and the needs. Then some emirate, trying to be clever, orders the equipment without realizing that only Ukrainian logisticians truly know how to make it work. But never mind, Mr. Zelensky's teams are on their way. So an entire region, which until yesterday regarded Ukraine as the distant theater of a foreign war, realizes that it depends on Ukrainian military science. The nature of cards, the President of the United States should know, is that they always end up changing hands. They changed hands when Athens and Sparta invented the phalanxes of hoplites, those citizen soldiers who defeated the Persians at Marathon. When gunpowder arrived and the emerging nation-states rendered obsolete the old art of war dominated by feudal lords entrenched in their castles. And when nuclear weapons appeared and the gap widened between the powers that possessed them and those that didn't. That is what is happening with this new age of drone warfare, an age in which the Ukrainians, with their backs against the wall, have pulled ahead of everyone else. On the battlefield over the past 4 years, I have watched the shift up close. At the beginning of the war, I filmed brilliant young men tinkering in forest huts, using 3D printers to build their first birds of fire. Then the engineers of Trident, near Kharkiv, moving to another scale and paving the way for decisive technological breakthroughs. Then, in the Zaporizhia area, workshops where enemy devices were dismantled, their entrails methodically examined, their secrets extracted piece by piece. In bunkers and in the snow, I filmed with the men of the Kartelia Brigade or those of the poet Oksana Rubaniak, the new drone army taking control of entire stretches of the front and defeating, with ultimately modest means, the powerful Russian army. The result is there. 4 years ago, the Ukrainians were begging for help. They pleaded for help in closing the sky, in Mr. Zelensky's beautiful phrase. At best, we admitted that they were our bulwark against Vladimir Putin, our first line of defense, and that they deserved that we do something for them. Today, everything has changed. Now it is Mr. Zelensky who is being implored. It is Mr. Zelensky who stands at the center of the new paradigm and the new world it is shaping. It is on the plains of Ukraine, at the heart of a nation besieged, bombed, yet more inventive than any other, that the military revolution of the 21st century was born. I don't know whether Kyiv will eventually enter the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It hardly matters. What is true today for the Middle East may tomorrow be true for Europe. And who knows whether, by one of those singular reversals of history, it will be the Ukrainian army that we one day ask to protect us. Now for a comparison of interest rates to last week and now. Last week, the money market annual yield was 0.42%, today 0.41. A 5-year CD annual yield was 1.69, now 1.68%. A 30-year fixed mortgage was 6.20%, now 6.42. A 15-year mortgage fixed was 5.65%, now 5.72. Jumbo mortgages were 6.40%, now 6.44. A 5-year adjustable mortgage was 5.86, now 5.88%. A new car loan, 48 months, remains the same, 6.92%. Letters to the editor, the topic, Iran war demands cooperation, abroad too. David Boies is 99% correct in his urging Americans to support President Trump's efforts to degrade Iran's capability to attack other countries or hold international commerce hostage. Would that all issues could be addressed so rationally and dispassionately. The example of Harry Truman omits the key fact that he took the Korean issue to the United Nations, and multiple allies sent forces to repel North Korea and its backers. The UN of 2026 isn't the UN of 1950, but allies are no less essential. Making the case to other nations helps legitimize the mission and its necessity. It also spreads the risk of war and adds broader wisdom to the effort. Iran is obviously not giving up. It will take more time and more resources to render it and keep it defeated. It isn't too late to enlist allies. From Jerry Cohen, Advance, North Carolina. Same topic. Mr. Boies' op-ed speaks truth, but he fails to give credit where credit is due. Barack Obama bears more guilt than any other president. Congress's passage of the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act of 2015, with significant pressure from President Obama on Democrats to allow for a review of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was the defining act that made not only Iran a partisan issue, but also Israel, which vehemently lobbied against it. The results have been dangerous to America ever since. From David A. Davies, Houston. The Pepper and Salt cartoon shows a businessman interviewing a woman for a possible position, and he says, "We are looking for a press secretary with skills in denial, obfuscation, and circumlocution." You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 19th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend.